Hi there, and welcome to the Skylight Books author reading series. If you'd like to learn more about us and our many upcoming author events, please visit skylightbooks.com, where you can browse our inventory, buy books, and join our Friends with Benefits Club. You can also follow us on Twitter, Tumblr, and Facebook. To speak to a real live bookseller like me, please call 323-660-1175. Thanks for your support, and enjoy.
Hi. Hey.
Oh, that was violent. Okay. Oh, okay. Every time I do one of these stand mics, I'm always just like, oh.
Put your mouth on it. That's what I always do.
I mean, whenever I have a phallic object near here.
Right. That's why God made mouths.
It is.
Yeah.
Amen.
That's what my mom always said.
Wait, put that in my book for parents.
Yeah, write that down.
I will.
It's Roxane's. No one else can use it.
Hello, Angelinos. Thanks for coming out tonight to celebrate Eat Only When You're Hungry, a novel. I love when it says that, like, super helpfully, just in case you weren't clear.
I know. Well, because even when I first showed this cover, like, on Facebook, have you guys heard of Facebook? Someone was like, oh, I need that in my life. And I was like, cool, you must really like literary fiction. But they thought it was a diet book. Yeah. And I hear that all the time. They're like, so is it fiction or is it a dieting book? And I'm like, it's fucking fiction.
Like what part of a novel is unclear?
Yeah.
Oh, I bet people would think, oh, I get it. Like, kind of, oh, that would be a great diet book with all this delicious food on it.
If you only eat it when you're hungry, it's fine.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it kind of works both ways, and I'd love to get the diet guru money. So, do you know anyone? This is like a cautionary tale of dieting.
It is, actually.
It's not.
Among other things.
Well, it kind of is, yeah.
It is, yeah, there's a lot of cautionary tales here.
Yeah.
How did you come up with this?
This book, it was something that I wanted to write for a while, but I wasn't letting myself. I think partly because writing from the perspective of a 58-year-old man felt scary. And I sat down to start writing my next book, and it was going to be this, or it was going to be about witches.
Oh, wow. So similar.
And I was like, today I want to write about Greg, and I just started writing about him, and I just took it from there. Yeah, I felt like I knew him immediately. I felt like he just was fully formed, and I just went with him.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. So, do you have a specific process for writing a novel now that this is your second novel?
Oh, yes. Well, I like to think about, I saw Linda Berry speak once. You guys are familiar with her. And she was talking about when she was writing Cruddy. And she was typing, and she just kept thinking to herself, like, this isn't working. Like, how would I write a book if I was writing it? How would I write it? And then she was like, oh, I am writing it. And she thought, well, I would paint it first, and then I would, write what I had painted. And so I thought, well, how would I write a novel? How would I do it in a way that felt doable and fun and rewarding? Because I eschew the picture of the writer who's fucking toiling and miserable for his art and just like gonna create something that like is like the great American novel, but it's just hates life. I just hate that. So I was like, well, if I was writing a novel, I would write it like flash fiction. I would write it that so that I could feel like I was writing something complete every time I sat down. So I gave myself a word count every day, and I don't usually, when I'm writing flash fiction, I don't use word counts, but it felt like a doable thing I could do. So I think I wrote like 2,500 words a day. And it ended up being these little micro chapters that the book is now. And then I could feel like, well, I got that done today. I'm not a total failure. I'm building something, I'm constructing something, and the page numbers are growing, and it seems legit.
Too legit to quit?
It was so legit that it couldn't quit.
Awesome. Every time I hear the word legit, I just lose my shit.
You just added a new verse.
I know.
I introduced my son to that song for the first time the other day, and he was like, Mom, why are they so legit? Why can't they quit? And I was like, I really don't know.
Once you find those answers, young man.
I know. I was like, that's such a good pursuit.
You will know everything.
Yeah. I was like, it's an important undertaking.
It is.
But yeah, so it was like a it wasn't always fun. I mean, like there are many moments when you want to throw your computer across the room, or you're like, you read other books that you really love, and you're like, I can never accomplish that, or who's going to read this? Or I had a moment in the middle of it where I was like, oh my gosh, this is a middle-aged cisgendered white male. Like, great, everyone's going to love to read that. Like, there's not enough of those out there. And then I convinced myself that it was like super punk rock to be writing that from like the perspective of a 30-something white female.
It's never been done before. So great.
So it's really punk rock, and that's my success story.
Do you want to read a little for us?
Sure.
Yay.
First, I must swallow my gum.
Okay. Oh, wow. So, how old are you now?
37.
With you until you're 40?
I'm the mother of 2. And I do not let my children swallow their gum.
I hope not. It stays in your body for 7 years.
That's not true.
Oh, it isn't?
No.
Oh. I grew up thinking that, so every time I swallow a piece of gum, I'm like, fuck, the clock is still ticking.
Another 7 years.
Like right now, it's going to be until I'm 47.
Oh my gosh, what have you done to yourself?
I know.
Well, we'll be like gut twinsies, because it's disgusting what's going on in there.
Things are all stuck up in there.
Yeah, I mean, all the hair I've eaten over the years, like not even my own hair.
Gum. Oh.
I have this thing where if I see a hair, later we can explore these things.
Yeah.
I'm one of those people that there's like a hair in my food in a restaurant or something, I'm too embarrassed for the server to say anything, so I just fucking eat it.
That is the whitest shit I ever. Wow. No. Our ancestors did not survive for that. Oh my god. Oh.
Saying it out loud did not feel good, I have to admit.
Good.
It fucking sucks, and my insides are roiling, maybe because of the gum, but maybe because I'm a terrible person.
Maybe.
But speaking of the whitest shit ever, would you like to hear from this book? I'm just going to read the first chapter, maybe not even the whole chapter, because I might die in the middle, and then we can move on. Okay.
And we'll just like talk over your corpse?
Yeah, I would prefer that to happen. Anytime I die, I would like people just to talk over my corpse until I disintegrate.
Alright, I'll let everyone know.
Please tweet it to all your followers. Okay, that was not part of the novel. It was too late to be a lunch, too early to be a dinner, this disappointing collection of food Greg was packing. He was leaving in the odd smear of time between the markers of his day, not in the morning, not in the night, not even in the midday. After lunch, before dinner, the sun was out but getting lazy, everything starting to give over, accepting that this day's moment was swiftly passing. Maybe that was why he finally left. He had to get away from the giving over for once. His son had been missing 3 weeks. He was packing a meal using what he had in the fridge, a buttered heel of bread, a rhombus of stiff cheese, a puckered tangerine, its skin loose around the wedges inside it. When had he last bought tangerines? It had been months, maybe a year. Sometimes what he thought was a long time passing ended up being only a few weeks. Hey, when was that? Last summer? Last Christmas? And his wife answering, honey, that was only just last month. So who could know when anything actually happened? When he was a child, he often had to mark time for himself. Today is Tuesday, that I know for sure. At least I know that for sure. He was already looking forward to ignoring the lunch, stopping somewhere along the way, having a conversation with a waitress. I'm looking for my son. What came next? Shock? Admiration? He liked anticipating these kinds of things. The house was implacable, quiet and unaffected. When he left, for all the time he'd be gone, the items in the house would stay in the same place. The house was not asking him for anything. The house wasn't begging him to stay. Instead, it was watching him go. Couch, he whispered. Ottoman. Marking time, marking stasis. Then he said his own name, Greg. He could just as easily have said the other names he was known by, Honey, Gregory, Dad. But at the end of the day, he thought of himself as only Greg. The buttery yellow light coming in through the plate glass windows at least offered its confetti of dust, a stingy fanfare. His wife dusted often, almost daily, but sometimes you can't win for losing. You can't win for losing. There he was, his son, Greg Jr., GJ. Had he said it to GJ or had GJ said it to him, and when? On how many occasions? GJ as a child crying over a bloody knee, GJ on the phone calling from rehab, GJ drunk on the couch. On couch. Likely they had said it to each other, neither truly listening, GJ with his big paw hands, his oily t-shirts, his face getting fleshy, then gaunt, then fleshy again. Beautiful boy, my beautiful boy. Greg's eyes felt warm. But was he crying for himself or for GJ? Did he think he should cry, or did he actually want to cry? These were the thoughts that kept him from the trip for the past 3 weeks, for his whole life, that kept him from life. Again, he felt like crying, but stopped himself. His throat pained, feeling stretched, like it was making room for something. He didn't feel allowed to cry just yet. He had seen a woman on one of those Saturday night crime shows talking about her own missing child. I know she's alive, the woman said, tears erupting from her eyes. I feel it inside. I know she knows. I'm looking for her, and I won't ever, ever stop. Greg didn't have that same certainty. He could never feel absolutely certain about anything, least of all GJ, who felt as elusive and slippery as his own beating heart. But he felt sure objectively that he should never, ever stop looking for GJ, even if GJ was standing right in front of him right this minute. He put the lunch into one of the huge Ziploc baggies his wife saved and placed it by the door so he could grab it on the way out. The grandfather clock made a few half-hearted tones. It was 3:15. He hurried upstairs to pack a bag. The bedroom always smelled familiar, sweet and clothy. His and his wife's scent, their signature. Did they leave it behind them at restaurants, at church? Was the smell the same for her as it was for him? Sometimes he felt exhausted by all the not knowing, by all the wondering, wandering. The oval full-length mirror next to the bed offered him a framed portrait of himself standing in his exhausted slippers, his calves still strong though too pale and disturbingly hairless. The frayed hem of the purple gym shorts he wore daily now because their elastic was shot and because they stopped the laborious swinging of his balls, caged them in a calming inner mesh pouch he had come to love. The triple XL undershirt, the V of his chest hair still mostly brown, something he never failed to notice or feel thankful for. His belly straining at the shirt, pushing out, out, out like it was pleased to meet the world. Greg often attempted to quantify its heft, a belly pregnant with triplets, the hull of a small boat taking on water, a laundry sack filled with beer. He carried it around, this heavy imposter, day after day, his back giving and giving. There, too, were his hands, thicker than they had been when he was a young man, when his fingers were long and his knuckles seemed an afterthought, not the bulgy crooks they were now. His acneed neck, he never had figured out how to avoid shaving rash. He had tried steam, lotions, shaving in the other direction, all to no avail. And the large anvil of his head and face, his chin and neck connected by a flap of flesh, a sheet on the line that had grown into the pin and the grass. He could see the pores in his cheeks and nose from where he was standing, his face sprouting leaks and caving into sinkholes, consuming itself, the gnarled, tortured dough of his nose, his hazel eyes, which could still appear blue or green under the right circumstances, but were always too wet-looking, like he was on the perpetual verge of a sneeze. The jagged hedge of hair, graying but still thick, a small mercy. He took it all in as he did when he could stand to. If this is what GJ has to look forward to in his old age. And then he looked away, thankful to have a task at hand. He found a crumpled duffel bag under the bed, shoved clothes and his toothbrush inside it, more than enough socks. He'd read a war novel once that said wearing wet and dirty socks was worse than getting shot. He decided he needed to throw in a pair of nail clippers as well. Then he decided to bring his father's pocket knife, though it was dull and mostly for show at this point, an item of remembrance, another marker of time. Honey? His wife was in the doorway. He hadn't heard her come in. Crisp white button-down tucked into a flowered skirt, feet planted shoulder-width in their white sneakers, sturdy freckled calves, hair pinned back out of her eyes, purse snug under her arm, nothing worrisome, nothing out of place. His wife was a relief to his brain. Everything about her made sense. When was the last time we bought tangerines, he asked. He had a ball of socks in each hand, and it felt good to have something to hold, to have a purpose for each hand. His wife took a step into the room, then stopped. Well, I was just at the store. Should I have... She looked at the socks in his hands, at the duffel on the bed. I was just wondering how long it's been. He transferred one sock ball to the other hand so he could have a free hand for gesturing, natural gesturing. I guess I don't really remember, she said, putting her purse onto the chair by the door where it relaxed and slumped in on itself like a teenager. Not remembering was often good enough for his wife, and though he admired this about her, it also made him feel panicked on occasion. I believe we had some in a salad about a month or so ago. Remember the night we had salmon steaks? She took another step toward him. His wife knew he felt more comfortable knowing. He could see her trying to bring up the memory, force it into existence. He did remember, though. He remembered raspberries in the salad that night. He slotted in the tangerine wedges instead and decided to leave it be. He had only brought it up to buy himself some time. "You're going after GJ," she said, sitting on the arm of the chair. "I thought we talked about this." We did. You know that he might not want to be found, Greg, right? And if you do find him, you might not want to see him that way." She had picked up her purse again, was moving the straps in her hands like she was trying to figure out what they were made of. She was not GJ's mother, though she had mothered him when GJ stayed with them, and Greg sometimes had ugly thoughts about how she could never understand. She had once had to stick her fingers down GJ's throat, had caught his vomit in her shirt the way one catches falling apples. She had said soothing things, patted his back, led him into the shower, but then she had not slept in bed with Greg that night or the night after that. They did this to each other, traded rage back and forth when GJ wasn't able to take it. "He knows I'll come for him, Deb. I can't ever stop coming for him." He felt ridiculous saying it out loud, overly dramatic. But Deb was crying now, holding the backs of her wrists up to her cheeks, so maybe it had been the right thing to say. "I just want to know when it will end," she said, her voice pinched, almost whining. She was not a whiner. They had both retired early within 6 months of each other, had made promises about cooking classes and tennis and trips. "We could take naps," Deb said, and then in the same exact tone had said, "We can have sex in the middle of the day under the dining table." They had rejoiced in leaving the pressures of work behind. They were both accountants, she for a firm and he for a small group of wealthy idiots. One of his clients, a young man who owned 3 barbecue restaurants, had once asked him if laundering money literally meant washing it. But there was pressure and idleness too. Mostly they kept the TV on and went from room to room like they were playing a slow game of tag. Deb had invented reasons to leave the house: daily grocery shopping, book club, swim lessons. But for Greg, life had started to reveal itself as a series of distractions. It felt real only when he was quiet and still, emptied. Life felt real only when he felt like a ghost. Ha! Another dramatic thing. Well, now GJ needed him, and that was a welcome distraction from himself. When your son is an addict, you can think things like, "He is missing," and that is a welcome distraction, and not feel like a monster. Can't you? He had become inured, maybe. Was that even the right word? "It will end," Greg said. "This is the end." It was certainly an end to something, even if it was only the end to the day. Deb sniffed 3 quick times, getting herself together in her efficient way. GJ's mother was the kind to let her face get messy, to fall into itself, to let the snot flow right into her open mouth as she cried, to use her face, her feelings, as weapons against him. He felt a surge of love for Deb. They were the same kind of person. He understood her, and she understood him. He almost asked her to come along. In fact, it had been what he meant to say even as he began speaking. But instead he said, "I won't be gone long," which was possibly a lie. And Deb would never come along anyway. There was the matter of the errands she needed to run, the dusting, the swimming, the dishes, the endless circuit of keeping up. Greg could not keep up. He no longer wanted to. In this they were diverging, like someone had switched the tracks at the last minute, separating their train cars. They were waving at each other from windows, promising to meet up soon, so they were both lying. "I don't even know where you think he is." Deb's voice had righted itself, unclenched. She was ready to move on from the emotions to the details. "Will you take the Volvo?" No, he said. They only had the one car. "You keep the Volvo. I'm going to rent an RV." Deb stood up, smoothed her skirt, which accordioned back into wrinkles immediately. "Well, I'll drive you to town at least," she said. Like the house, she wasn't begging him to stay. She was watching him go. He wished he could see himself from her eyes, wished he could be in her brain, which was probably already on to planning the next few weeks, all the things she'd do while he was gone. Plant things, dig things up, arrange and rearrange, grocery shopping, satisfaction. No staring just to the left of the raging television, no letting noise just wash over her. They had never had sex under the dining table, and he thought maybe he should attempt it now before he left. But that felt like a planting all on its own. He'd be exhausted after. He had a sudden vision of all the shifting and wiping they'd have to do once it was finished. And during, there'd be all the thoughts they were having apart from each other, about each other. Then he'd tell himself he'd leave the next day, and then he never would. "Deb," he said. She was looking around, her eyes searching out something to add to his duffel, something necessary, logical, something he could be grateful to her for. Above everything, Deb valued being useful. What did he value above everything? Oblivion. Deb, oh my God. Is that an alarm that I should stop reading? Let me see. Oh my gosh, guys. I'll be done soon. Deb looked at him, waiting. He cleared his throat. "I took the last of the cheese." "Oh," she said, "I can get some more after I drop you off. Where should I drop you off?" He didn't know, but these were the things Deb was good for. She logged onto the internet and found a company a half-hour's drive away called Go West. By the time he was coming downstairs with his duffel bag, she'd rented him a vehicle. "They call it a 19-footer. It's a compact," she said, a pad of paper balanced on her knees, her ankles together neatly. She tapped her notes lightly with her pen. "Since it's just you, I figured that was okay. Plus, you're not good at parking larger vehicles." She was referring to the time years ago when they were moving GJ into a new apartment nearby, and Greg had backed the U-Haul into a motorcycle. In fact, it had terrified him. Even now he found himself snapping awake after a dream where he backed the U-Haul into Deb, or GJ, or a small child that was probably also GJ. "Thank you," he said. She was still sitting, looking up at him with her eyes wide, the way she tended to when she was being a know-it-all, something he found endearing. She looked almost childlike, Deb in her mid-50s, with threads of silver shooting through her blonde hair. He could see what she looked like as a child, pretty and serious. "You know," she was saying. She handed Greg her paper and pen. She often handed things to him to put away, maybe because it spoke of their partnership, their two sides to the same shell. "I think this might be a good thing." The windows behind her showed the tall trees they had in the yard, oaks and elms and a few firs, decades old, older than GJ, swaying like her backup dancers. "I think..." She was starting to cry again, Greg saw, tears surfacing and sliding down one after another. He put his hand on her shoulder, but then she laughed, a half bark that brought her hand up to hold the other half in. "Greg, I think I might feel relieved." She laughed harder now, her mouth open, looking into his face the way people do when they want to make sure their partners are getting the joke. Greg took his hand away, but it hung in the air like it was the one part of his body that wasn't made out of flesh, like it was a metal claw or a balloon. He couldn't figure out what to do with his hand, or how he should help Deb, or if she even needed help. Her shoulders shook. She was making a silent cackling noise. "Relief is good, right?" Greg said. He also felt relieved, was the thing. But he and Deb had an unspoken agreement not to call a spade when it came to moments like these. People had complicated emotions. That was understood between them when they began getting serious 20 years ago, and there was no need to discuss it. He had gotten fat in retirement. He had gotten slow, even more tired than he ever had been working. He carried his lethargic body as far as it could go. Even lying down felt like he was being asked to wear a suit made of mud. He felt assaulted by the possibilities of the day, exposed by the sun. Deb had quickly learned to call him half an hour before coming home in the afternoon, so he'd have time to rush around and tidy up, change out of his pajamas, brush his teeth, pretend he hadn't been sitting in the same place for hours and hours. There was no need to discuss it. Deb understood, and Greg understood that she understood, and he was grateful not to have to explain himself because he didn't even know where to begin. Because how can you start at oblivion? Deb voicing her relief was a change, almost a betrayal, but he didn't have time to get into it. Suddenly he had to get out. "It's okay to feel relieved," he said. "I just mean you're doing something. I'm relieved to see you doing something. You packed a lunch." She was holding her hand out, palm up, to where he dumped his Ziploc of fridge orphans. "I did. I even buttered a piece of bread." This made her laugh even harder, her elbows on her knees, both hands over her mouth. He laughed too, both of them laughing at Greg, this Greg goof who was basically a lump with eyes. Deb inhaled a big shuddering gulp. She'd had her fill of laughing for now. She took his hand, the metal claw, and folded it into the soft warmth of her paws. "But Greg, I just want you to know that GJ is beyond us now. This will probably not end well. Do you understand?" Her voice was so tender, so gentle. She was trying to ready him for destruction. GJ had never gone missing for more than a couple of days, and even then it had been easy to find him in 3 phone calls tops. She was telling him that GJ was dead, or as good as. "I understand." He did not agree. He did not understand. One summer evening many lifetimes ago, he'd been the one to tuck GJ into bed. The boy excited, a treat to have Greg all to himself. The boy reaching under his pillow, whispering, "Dad, look what God has been leaving for me in the yard." A baggie of spider's eggs, brown and fuzzy. Greg had yanked the bag from the boy's hands, run through the house, stomped the baggie to a pulp on the driveway before he thought to explain to the boy what he'd actually collected. GJ crying so hard that he made no sound, open-mouthed grief. Greg had had a fight with GJ's mother that night. His emotions were right there, his rage. He'd been so young then. Why hadn't he just emptied the eggs into the yard? How could GJ be suddenly dead? None of it computed. None of it fell into place. Deb was standing now. "When you're ready," she said. GJ had gone through a phase of mimicking her mannered ways, napkin in lap, elbows poised, just off the table, saying many thanks instead of thank you. Then he had entered a phase of despising her every move, as if her way of living, her clean, ordered, thoughtful way of living was in direct insult to his. There were moments when Greg felt the same way. When you're ready? Like he was one of her clients during tax season. But then she reached out, ran a fingertip across his cheek, cold and soft as a paintbrush. He hadn't known he was crying despite himself until then. He felt foolish, judged by the air he was breathing. Simpering old man. Ottoman, rigid with embarrassment for him. I'm ready, he said.
So when you are doing publicity for a book, you generally have to come up with a really quick summary of the book. Have you come up with yours yet?
No, I haven't.
Oh, excellent.
A father searches for his son and himself. Boom!
Oh my God, wow.
I'm not even going to drop the mic. I'm going to football spiral it into the back.
I like that. That's fantastic. Fantastic. So this is a book, in addition to a father looking for his son, it's kind of a quest, a journey, if you will, in a camper, all across the South, Florida, strip clubs, fast food restaurants, America. It's great.
Yeah.
It's also about excess and bodies that live in excess. So why did you want to tackle that, this idea of weight and excess?
I think, personally, I have my own issues with food and weight and all that stuff, and I felt like it was something I was thinking about a lot, and it was something that I feel like when that happens, when I can't stop thinking about something, or I can't stop just experiencing it, I feel like it's something that has to be exercised in some way. So it was definitely something just personally that I wanted to write about and sort of figure out as I wrote, which is I think how I figure most things out. But I also just thought it was a unique way of exploring his character, because he is so rooted in his body. He is so it's something, rather than something that he is in partnership with, it's something that not only he drags around but drags him around. And it's sort of the same way that he faces everything. You know, he isn't able. It's his own denial, I guess. And I was talking about this with someone in another interview. And we were talking about how eating and overeating and the access to these kinds of foods, you know, which you can see on the cover of my beautiful book, is like a kind of freedom in America. It's definitely personally freedom for me. It's you know, it's a very easy way to fill a hole. And I know that's like the biggest cliche ever, but it's so true. It's
also true.
It's very true. And it's immediate satisfaction, and when you don't have any interest or energy, or there's so many other things preventing you from doing the work, it's an easy way to feel like there's some sort of accomplishment that you've, you know, accomplished. God, I don't know where I was going with that. But it's like, it's a very easy way to reward yourself, and it's a very easy, like, task to complete. I feel sad. I want a moon pie, you know? That's like the fucking American story, you know?
Yes. And the dream.
And the dream, honestly. Like, I would love a moon pie right now.
I've actually never had one.
What?
I know what they are, but I've not yet had one in life.
They're special. Do you like marshmallow?
I like marshmallows, but I don't know that I like marshmallow in, like, other forms.
Okay.
Like, if someone gave me a jar of fluff, I would be like, But I use fluff.
I could polish off a jar of fluff.
You can use really?
Oh, God. Marshmallows, for some reason right now, I cannot get enough of them. I'm into marshmallows. Trader Joe's makes vegan ones.
Oh, I don't care about that. I'm glad to know that, but no, I'll fuck up a marshmallow whether it's vegan or not. But I only like the big ones.
Yes.
Because the little ones are too uncomfortable in my mouth.
The big ones are extra pillowy too.
They make me feel like there's a pillow in my mouth.
Yes.
Whenever I look at a pillow, I'm like, I want to eat that. Not in a food way. I just want to chew on the pillow. There's something about it.
Mouth it a little bit.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's hard.
Like a crisp white pillow.
It is, and that's what the big marshmallows are, and they're just when they're fresh.
Mm-hmm. I like the steel ones too.
You do have a problem.
I want to like leave them open.
not the judge, but no, that's certified.
I'm like, who left these open? Animals? I love a little crunch to my marshmallow.
And then like when they give off a little proof of dust.
Yeah.
Food is so sensual.
It really is.
Yes.
I tried to do those big marshmallows all in one bite, and you can't.
Oh, yes you can. Challenge accepted.
I feel like we're dating now.
A little bit.
And I'm happy about that.
I'm turned on.
Really happy
I feel like let's just go get some marshmallows in a hotel room and see what happens.
We're just gonna get on some pillows, you know,
like in the morning, it'll just be ravaged pillows. Carcasses of marshmallow bags.
They're gonna be like, these pillows feel licked. Is that like a thing?
What is your dream? Look, this is Los Angeles.
What's your dream to lick a pillow?
Everybody's got a dream. Hollywood.
This is Hollywood. That's right.
Delicious. Did you have to do any taste testing in the writing of this novel?
Oh, that's a great question. My whole life was a taste test.
Amen.
I feel like, so what's really cool is, my editor's here, FSG asked me what foods should be on the cover. And so I basically just named all my favorite food groups, and foods that hold, they're like road trip foods. They're like foods you can get at a gas station, because that's where, Greg would be getting most of his food in this book. And my special edition was the circus peanuts, because how can you not? Also a good stale circus peanut. Come on, that is gourmet.
That's the Florida in you.
That is the Florida in me. This book is the Florida in me. So buckle up. I didn't do any taste testing. I wish that I had. It was a huge failure on my part.
But there's always time.
Yeah, I feel like that should be an event. I feel like we should have a buffet of these foods.
I know,
Emily.
book launch, surrounded by everything on the cover.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
I'm just here to give you ideas.
Just I would like to be buried up to my neck, and maybe my arms can come out so I can hold my book while I read, and then people can just come
and eat off of you?
And eat off of me.
Like Sushi Girl?
Yeah. Yes.
Oh my god! I hope someone's recording this. There's so much gold here tonight.
I mean, after having 2 kids, we were talking about this earlier. After having 2 kids, I want everyone to see my body. I mean, I know it's it did a cool thing.
Mm-hmm. It did.
And it looks like it did a cool thing. That's extra, though. That's extra $5 if you guys want to see that.
So, Greg is remarried in this novel, and his first wife, Marie, is a significant part of this novel. How did you decide to incorporate her into the story? And what were the satisfactions of bringing Marie in?
Well, I really love how she never edits herself for him. Even in that first chapter, you see that Deb edits herself and makes sure that she's not pushing him in any way. That's the agreement that they have together is, we will not, we've had enough of that in our lives. We'll just be cool with each other. But Marie is just always herself, just out there. She will say whatever comes to her brain. And it's really hard for Greg to be around that because there's so much that he doesn't want to face. He doesn't want to talk about really anything. And especially his marriage to her, his past, the mistakes that they made with GJ. And she was really fun to write. I don't think I intended her to be as big of a part as she ended up being. Never mind, I'm not going to say it's a spoiler, but she does end up being a larger part of the book, and I just, I feel like it was a way to see a version of Greg that he didn't give permission for, and that's the version of anyone you want to see, And she knew him when he was young and before all of this, and that's really beautiful, even though so much ugliness came after, that was a beautiful time in their lives. So I felt like I used her as a way to call bullshit on Greg, because the whole book is in his head. So and she was fun. She was really fun.
One of the main characters is GJ, but we never really see him.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Was it difficult to write from a place of absence?
Yeah, well, I struggle with that a lot, and my husband hasn't read it yet, but he knows sort of he's reading it right now.
I was like, yeah.
I know, I saw you writing the divorce papers right now. I was like,
that's it, Lindsay's on the market, ladies and gentlemen.
Whatever you tell me to do. But no, he's reading it now. I actually told him I didn't want him to read it until it was finished. But I was telling him sort of the broad strokes, it's about this guy who looks for his son, and he was like, well, he has to find it. That's all there is to it. Otherwise, it's bullshit. Like, you have to. That's it. You owe it to the reader. And I struggled with that. And spoiler, ultimately I decided that the book wasn't about that. And that's why I think I was struggling so hard with it, because it wasn't about this. Like, at one point I was like, Greg's gonna find him in like a weird cult, and it's gonna be about the cult. And I was like, no, it's not. It's not about that. It's not about that. And then for a time, just recently, I've been like, well, I'm going to write this whole novel again, but from his point of view, and then I'm going to write it again from Marie's point of view. But I think it's, I'm definitely not going to do that. Who has the time? But I feel like in the end, you get to see GJ's perspective of Greg. It's, in a brief but accurate way, and it was enough. So.
Well, I think we should take questions from the audience.
No pressure.
No pressure. About anything. About food.
Yes, my beloved. That's my friend Robbie from Florida.
The biggest emotional roadblock in creating the narrative?
The biggest emotional roadblock.
You can answer this later.
When we're hanging out later. Yeah. Well, I think a lot of it had to do with whether or not GJ, he was going to find GJ, what that even meant. Honestly, I thought I was writing a really funny, hopeful book. That's not what I've heard from readers, including my own agent. So I was like, this is like, I know that it's emotional, and I know that there's a lot of, sadness in it, but I thought I was writing, I was hoping to give Greg, or, the narrative, like a little bit more hope or grace at the end, which I still believe that I did. That's me yelling at myself.
Okay.
Happens. But I think that was it. I think that was like one of the main things is how far I wanted to push that, or how I wanted to bring that around. And I have people in my life that struggle with addiction, and, remaining true to that was also really a big concern of mine. So yeah. Great question, Robbie.
Thank you, Robbie. Other questions? Yes.
Hi. You mentioned, so you were talking earlier about it being, you were sort of referring to, or like intimidated maybe to tackle writing from a male perspective, or a middle-aged man. Was there anything about that? Because, part of being a writer is writing perspectives that aren't your own.
Yeah.
What about that did you find the most challenging?
I was just really, I think when I started to write, I just was wanting to write this person as a person. So I wasn't thinking like, ooh, let me look at him from the stereotype that he is, which helps so much, I think all of us writers think like, I want to write about this, like dirt bike racer with like a flipper hand, and all of us want to do that. But if you look at it from that, and it sort of becomes tropey, it sort of becomes, it's immediately like false and silly. So, but if you start from a place of emotion, if you start from a place of like even object in that person's home, something they touch, it sort of opens up to you. So if you think about it in terms of like, I'm just going to write this person, and then later you have an existential crisis about, oh my God, this is middle-aged white man, and I'm not that. But then you just keep pushing forward. And yeah, so I think as long as someone was asking me about, this is a novel I'm writing about, and it was a male, and he had written a novel from the point of view of a woman, and he was really concerned about that. And I was like, well, did you write her as a person? Then I think you're going to be okay. So that's step number one.
That's a good step.
Just imagine that the person is human, and go with that. Yeah.
I'm taking notes.
Thank you, Roxane.
Other questions? Yes.
Do you think that the title is misleading with regard to...
Oh, because it sounds like a diet book?
Well, no, not necessarily, but that it actually connects with your central character?
I think that's what I wanted it to do. So you're saying it's misleading in that it doesn't connect with him, or?
Well, it seems a little bit random.
Oh. In the book, he's thinking about dieting advice that he's been given, and one of the pieces of advice he's been given is eat only when you're hungry. Well, if you're a food addict, or you're any sort of addict, eating only when you're hungry means you eat all the time. So it's sort of a devastating piece of advice. It's but it's also sort of good news, because it's like, great, well, I'm hungry right now, and I'm going to be hungry in 5 minutes, and I'm going to be, and I'm a heroin addict, and I want heroin all the time, so I'll eat only when I'm hungry, and that's great advice for me. I can keep doing what I'm doing. So that's what I wanted it to convey, and that's all I have to say about that.
What is the worst piece of dieting advice you've ever gotten?
I guess it's not advice that I was given. It was advice that someone I know was told. We both had babies at the same time, and her mother printed out a picture of Giselle Bundchen, mailed it to her, and said, hang this up, and this will help you lose your baby weight. Her baby was days old.
I'm gonna go try that immediately.
Can you? Yeah, so I just...
From someone's mother, I mean, that's how you lose a mom.
Yeah, and I think the one that I hate the most is... Nothing tastes as good as skinny feels.
Which is a lie.
That is a fucking lie. And
That's someone who has never had French fries.
Thank you. Or marshmallows or pillows. I think let's talk about this, because if you have time, you just posted a blog post of all the horrible dieting advice that you've been given on your book tour, etc.
Yeah, I wrote a book called Hunger,
Have
and
you guys heard of it?
it's a book about bodies and weight. It's a memoir, and I have gotten so much dieting advice since the book came out, and just absurd dieting advice, like just crazy batshit nonsense. Like, don't.
Roxane, did you know if you eat broccoli, you'll be healthy?
A Canadian offered me $100 Canadian a gift, but not only that, she said that she would send me a gift worth $100 Canadian if I went vegan for 3 months and lost weight. And if I didn't, I have to send her $150 US. I mean, it was like the worst deal in the history of deals.
You know, her ass got like the $100 Yankee Candle package from someone and was like, I just want to get rid of this. I make money.
I know. I was just like, bitch, what? Fuck you.
What did you say? Did you even respond?
I did.
I know, that's the best thing about Roxane, isn't it?
I did. And she was like, oh, well, I said, first of all, it's Dr. Gay. Which is like, I never use it in my life, ever, but I use it with assholes all the time. It's like American Express. I never leave home without it. And so I was just like, are you crazy? I said, you can go fuck yourself. If you read my book, you would know that I've been a vegetarian for most of like the past decade, off and on. And so like, I'm well versed in plant-based lifestyles, and I'm all for it. But no. And she wrote back that I was very rude. And
you're like, I'll be wiping my tears with my own $100, okay?
Like, if that's, you were like, how the audacity of reading, and she didn't read the book. She read, of course not. She read an excerpt online, which the internet is good for many things, but not for excerpts, apparently. And so, yeah, I get a lot of dieting advice.
Yeah.
Oh, walk 3 days, a man.
What?
So, I mean, do you know
Stop
that
it, a man?
Yeah.
Said something to you?
Oh, men have a lot of expertise on women's bodies.
I know.
It's remarkable because I have met so few that have actual expertise on women's bodies. But yeah, he told me to walk 3 days a week. Like, as if I don't. Like, who doesn't?
My whole body is blushing.
Is it really? This is good. You're welcome.
My dad told me I had chubby knees.
Oh, that's bad.
I know.
Because what's worse is if I
Like,
look at your knees.
now all I do is work on my knees. I'm so embarrassed.
Oh my god.
Yeah, I was in my homecoming dress. Robbie was there. And my dad was like, you have chubby knees like your mom.
Yeah, that's how you lose a father. We have a bunch of parentless children.
Oh, I lost your father. Yeah, like men, and they're like, maybe he thought he was helping me. Like, you need to cover those up, like like a cat, a midi length. Because my dad knows that phrase. Do I what?
Do you still speak to him?
Oh, I do.
Okay.
Often.
Well, that's good.
He's full of advice.
I'm sure. Has he read this?
No, I sent him a copy. He likes to read everything about me, but not necessarily, because it's too close, It's like people boning and, he's just like, but he called me and left me a very nice voicemail when he got the book, and at the end he kind of choked out, I will read it. So I knew that was a lie. And I called him the next day, because it's very, even if you're like, okay, obviously I got that message, I feel great, I can move on. If you don't call him to thank him for thanking you, baby boomers, fucking narcissists. Anyway, I love you, Daddy. I called him the next morning and I was like, hey, I got your message, I love it, I'm saving it on my phone, it meant a lot to me. And he's like, yeah, I gotta run. He wasn't in the moment anymore, so he had to, like dads, man,
Parents.
Men.
All right, other questions? Yes.
Was he based off a real RV person in Florida? He seems like a lot of RV people that I've met.
RV people?
Yeah.
I have a story called RV People. It's just like connecting. No. He's like a amalgam of, lots of different things. An RV person. I guess I didn't think of him as an RV person. That's interesting.
You've never heard that phrase in Florida?
I don't. Robbie, have you? Help me out, Robbie.
Yeah, we just live that way, so.
Yeah, we don't call ourselves that. It's reductive.
The RV is implied.
Yeah. It's a place of living and inhabitants. Guys, I'm a writer.
You use words real good.
Other questions? We're happy to talk about whatever. Yes.
Yeah, whatever, honestly.
So building up the second question a little bit, I'm curious if in exploring his perspective from a middle-aged male about food and excess, were there any surprising discoveries to you about how a male would address that topic versus how a woman addresses or treats the topic?
That's a great question. Yeah, I think there's less of him. I mean, he does think about what women are thinking when they look at him. And he does, he worries about, is Marie going to be, a little worse for the wear? Hopefully she is, I wanted that to be a reality for him. I wanted him to think about that. I wanted him to think about, how the other sex thinks of him. And sex for him is a chore, but he still has desire. He'd just rather tamp that down so he doesn't have to deal with all the steps it takes to get to the goddamn dining room floor, or, Marie, well, never mind, I can't, this is a spoiler. So, it's his body his body is like a great big guard, like it prevents him from having to be touched or touch or really truly interact with the world, and that's a safe place to be. Have you guys read Hunger?
Oh my God.
It's a lot about that. If you guys have questions about Hunger, please. No, go please.
I'm so excited.
She's here.
You are like my literary hero, and any book that you endorse, I am certainly going to put like a focus on immediately. That was the most beautiful book of literature in the entire body of literature I've ever read. It was courageous, it was beautiful, it was victory over trauma. You moved my life, you've changed lives by that book.
Thank you.
And I have... I've read all the criticism that's unanimous. This is the most beautiful book ever written. I have some really stupid questions to ask you about, and they're going to kill me if I don't
Great.
And I just so love that you two are friends, and so I'm definitely, and that looks like a beautiful book.
No,
But I don't know if she's going on tour to Skylight. I asked them, I was trying to figure it out.
I've done many events here.
I know.
I did Difficult Women. We toured Hunger at the library.
Okay.
Yeah, so I've already done my LA event.
So I want to know 2 questions. I want to know how you arrived at the idea that middle-class girls run away by going to boarding school. It's such a unique, the body of your work, when I look at it, it's such a unique perspective to just realize that, you go to school 6 days a week in boarding school and you never have to work in college. So I'm wondering how you, with your focus and your reputation, lift that out, because you're working for everybody in your books. And the other thing, and so I'm wondering how you technically how you can succeed with those kinds of observations, because you walk a big territory. And I'm also dying to know if anybody from your high school has reached out to you, because I would have been that righteous soul that would have.
Oh, yeah. So, the first question is, so there's a line in Hunger about, this is how middle class girls crack up, you run away to boarding school. And, memoir is very specific, and it's about your experience. And so one of the interesting things about Hunger is that a lot of people have read the book and felt connection to the book, and have felt a universality, which is flattering, but it's not a universal book. It's my book. And so when I said that, I mean, it's of a kind of running away. It was just to point out, I'm aware of how lucky I am, that my running away was funded at a very great expense by my parents, and I went to an elite boarding school. Don't cry for me. So that's where I was going with that. And what was the second question again?
That book was so beautiful. I can't believe that no one from your high school has reached out to say it was wrong, or I was there for you, or.
Yeah, I've heard definitely from, the assault happened in junior high, and so I have not heard from anyone from junior high, but I've definitely heard from people I went to high school with. And it's always interesting the way people remember you versus the way you remember yourself. I remember myself as being a total loser, and I was shy and awkward, but I get so many emails from people I went to high school with who were like, you were so funny and so mean. Which is actually true. I know that to be true.
That doesn't sound like you.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, I wasn't mean. I had a sharp tongue. I had a very sharp tongue, and because I was so isolated and so self-protective that I had a very sharp tongue. But yeah, I've heard from quite a lot of people I went to high school with, and in very good ways. It's all been really, really great, actually. And in many ways, it's nice to know that I'm well remembered, because I don't remember myself well. So that has been very nice as well.
Your voice has such clarity.
Thank you.
I think any writer would die for the clarity and the cultural zeitgeist that you link into, where everyone just has to read your work. What do you do for that clarity?
Oh, I don't know. It's not something that I do. I just try to be as true to what I want to say as possible, and I try not to pander, which is very difficult, especially when your audience grows. It's very difficult to not want to give the audience what you think they might want, and so I just try to stay true to what I want to say, and knowing I'm not necessarily going to make friends. And that's definitely what I did with Hunger, because it's very difficult to talk about weight and say, I want to lose weight, when the fat positivity community rejects that. And I totally accept why they reject it. I think it's necessary to reject that narrative in general, but I also think that narrative is being rejected for people who are 30 pounds overweight, in which case, girl, yes, you are fine at 150 pounds. Stay where you are. And so I just try not to pander, and so that's what I do with Hunger. I just say what I wanted to say.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for your beautiful work.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes?
I have a question for Roxane. So I just finished your audiobook, because that's what I have time for. And I'm just wondering what your experience was like recording the audiobook.
Yes.
There's a lot of difficult parts to talk about. To say that out loud is a difficult experience, as much as probably the writing was. But I'm just curious what your experience was like.
It was great, actually. I recorded it here in LA. A lot of audiobooks are recorded here. And I worked with this really great guy. On the first day I walked into the studio, and it was this old white man. And I was just like, oh, fucking Christ. And which teaches me that I have as many prejudgments about people as people have about me. He ended up being this delightful, empathetic, wonderful director who really helped me make the audiobook into what it was. He made me as comfortable as I could possibly be. He was like, I read it to my wife, who loved it, and I'm just so in awe. And he was so generous, and he had water and lozenges and throat spray, and it was printed out, and there was a stand. And so there were times when I was so uncomfortable because he and the engineer were in the booth talking to me in the soundproof area, and there was a glass window so that we could see each other. And there were certain parts that I would read, and I would just be like, okay, Roxane, it's just one sentence. You just have to read this sentence and then get to the next, because it was so uncomfortable. So it was challenging for sure, but I also, this was my first time reading my own work in an audiobook, and I was really glad that I got to read this book, because I didn't want someone else's voice telling my story. And so it was awkward at times, not painful, because it's just been long enough, especially since the assault. Like, I've dealt with that as much as I'm going to. That it was just more awkward to be intimately in this very small enclosed space with two men I don't know reading about my innermost secrets that the world was going to hear next. Like, ooh, what next? Like, maybe next we'll eat nails. So that was challenging, but it was definitely fun. And it's interesting because now it's in the process of being optioned, and for that I think I might not be involved at all, which is weird, but the audiobook I wanted to be involved in. So yeah, thank you. Yes?
Roxane, how did you muster the courage to write Hunger? It seems impossible to believe.
Oh, how did I muster the courage? What I do with everything I write is tell myself no one's gonna read it. And I've said that for years, and it's also just the truth. I tell myself no one's gonna read my work. I'm always just like, girl, don't worry, no one's gonna read it, so you can put whatever the fuck you want in there. And that frees me up, because when I think too hard about people actually reading my work, I freeze up, and then I hold back, and I compromise whatever it is I'm trying to do in a given piece. And with Hunger, I honestly was just so tired of people projecting narratives onto my body that even though this isn't going to fix anything or change the world.
Oh, yes, it will.
Thank you. It was still a great opportunity to be able to tell my own story in my way and without having to compromise that story. And so I was terrified, and I actually kind of still am, but the benefits outweighed the costs. Hey, Kay.
Hi. How's it going?
It's going well. How are you?
Good. We were talking about how, like, when parents give bad dieting advice,
Mm-hmm.
like, that's how you lose a mom or dad, and it's easy to tell, like, strangers fuck off when they give stuff like that, but how do you establish that boundary with your parents? Because, like, I've been there where, like, they mean well, like, the concern and love is genuine, but, like, they're like, we cannot talk about this thing.
Yeah, it's challenging. Do you ever have to tell your parents? No.
I'm thinking of different instances, and I think I in that moment I feel so ashamed that I just sort of agree and like, oh yeah, I'll work on, yeah, I know, like, or I'll make a joke out of it, or whatever. It's hard because there's so many levels and layers to your parents saying anything to you.
Yeah, for me it's really challenging, but in the past 2 years I've put my foot down because I've listened to them talk about my weight since I was 13 years old, 14 when I really started gaining weight, and I'm over it. And so when I turned 40, I was just like, I'm 40 and I'm doing okay. I have a full-time job, I have a writing career, people know who I am, I bring honor to your name. Like, get off my goddamn back. And so I told them I'm going, and actually it was my person who said, like, put your foot down, just put your foot down. I mean, because she's my greatest advocate. And so I was like, So one day I tried it, and I just said, guys, we're not going to discuss my body as a family project anymore. It isn't. I'm aware of the issues, I'm working on it, but I'm going to work on it on my own time. I don't need any sort of fucking input from two very skinny people. And so whenever they would bring up my body, I would just hang up. And it took about 3 weeks And then they got the shit together because Haitian parents call every day. So that was a lot of hanging out.
Isn't it funny how it sometimes takes permission from someone else?
Yeah.
To like your person saying like, just say no, reject
Absolutely.
it.
It would have never occurred to
Right.
me to stand up for myself with my parents because that's not what Haitian children do. It would have never crossed my mind that I could tell them no and be respectful because like in our culture, you respect your parents. They're always right. And for someone on the outside to say, I respect your parents and I know you love them, but you are allowed to say no, really helped. And so it did take that, and then I gave myself that permission, and it has been so great to have conversations with my family that doesn't involve talking about my weight. And now like I'm losing a little weight and they're like, what are you doing? Click. I just had that the other day because I was like, that's not on the table. I'm sorry, that's not on the table. Like, you don't have to bring it up. I mean, you can be happy about it, but celebrate it on your own time because it's not about you at all. It's about me, and I don't really need to discuss it. And so that's
such a simple thing, but it's so hard.
Yeah, it's really hard. So I would just say, you're young. It's gonna. The older you get, the easier it is gonna get to put up that boundary. And I know family is very important, just based on our exchanges. So you can do it respectfully and just say, I appreciate it, but I'm fine. Because you actually are fine.
I know, what the hell are your parents talking about?
I know, it's like, you're fine.
I'm going to give you permission to hang up on your parents.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, I know they mean well, but no, you're absolutely fine. You're a lovely young woman, and they should just, let you live.
But they can't.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard, and I know that you're not going to like walk out of here and be ready to do it tomorrow, but like a year from now, 2 years, someday it's going to click. So just wait.
It's also you just saying like, I actually really like myself, and you know, like, and so I reject your narrative. I really like myself, you know, and that's hard. Simple but hard.
Yeah, it's amazing how hard it is to admit I like myself. I always think I'm a mess. So good, I'm a fucking mess. But God, I amuse myself. Like I really amuse myself. I think I'm very funny.
Those are some of my favorite tweets of yours where you're like, I just crack myself up, or when you really clap back on someone and you're like, bitch, I could buy your whole family and flush them down my gold ass toilet, you know, like, and you just go crazy, and it's like, it's clear you're cracking up, and it's really fun.
And it is funny, like, like some of the people that read them don't get that I'm not serious, but I mean, I'm serious about the clap back, but I'm not like serious about.
Like, I'm not going to drive to your house and run over your whole family.
I'm not going to actually purchase your family. I have better things to do.
If I wanted to.
Exactly. It's the principle of the thing. Just recognize.
Right. Check, please. I will buy this whole goddamn family.
Boom. I have a day job. Like, and then, like so many people, like, I'm not going to read any more of your work. I don't care. I have a paycheck that does not count on writing. I teach English, so it's not that great, but it doesn't matter. My bills are paid. Don't worry about it.
It's Dr. K.
It is. This mic is so ornery. Okay, I think we have time for 2 last questions. Yes.
I read your book and I loved it.
Thank you.
I also read your book and I've read all your books and I love them all.
Thank you.
And I have to say, like, when I was reading your book, as somebody who's lived in a fat body, I've been over 400 pounds in my life. I've navigated the world. It's not a wow, it's just the truth, right? Like, and I navigated the world fat, and I found myself flipping to your page and being like, she's not fat. It's just talking about fat bodies. And I had this like dissonance in my brain because I enjoyed what I was reading so much, but then it also felt very, at times, like it was a narrative the world has told me I'm supposed to feel like, you know, like I'm supposed to feel desexualized, I'm supposed to feel like othered, I'm supposed to feel like all the way that, like, I'm supposed to eat alone in my car in shame, like that's the way I feel sometimes, like the world looks at me. So I struggled with that a bit, and I want to know if that's something that you were aware of while you were.
Yeah, I think I wanted that for him. I actually really wanted that for him. I think it's, you know, again, I talked about this a little bit earlier, but it's another level of his self-denial. And it's another level of him not having to deal with things. He's alone, you know, and he likes it that way. because it's easier. So, I really wanted him to. This is the moment in his life when he is sort of setting out in his body and moving it, states, moving it down to Florida in an RV, and I wanted him to. I don't know. I wanted things to be very tactile and very, he's like peeling the onion of himself, and he hasn't maybe ever done that. So I think there's a lot of shame in him. There's a lot of fear, and there's a lot of rejection of the world. So that's, to me. A lot of that was caught up in his body issues, in his food issues. So that's what I intended. I don't want to further any sort of harmful narrative, but that was my intention.
Hi, I had a question for both of you about editing, because it's both very, very personal work and very, very creative work that may be outside of your usual comfort zone. How do you have somebody read that and give you feedback and criticism about it?
Emily? Here. I'm like super spoiled. Emily is really good about writers. Well, I'll speak for myself. There's a lot of self-loathing or self-doubt, or I have a lot of imposter syndrome. But Emily is very direct, and she knows what it's missing, and so she's and she knows how to push us. So I felt like because I've worked with her on 2 other books before, I felt like I could trust her completely, and I knew she would help me make the book a whole thing. So she would point out bullshit or say like we need to get a little bit further in here. I think at one point she was like, there needs to be more sex in this, there's not enough like humping. So she's very professional. Yes. So it's always weird being edited. It's always like, oh, I'm the worst. This is awful, and she's just doing this because she feels sorry for me. Like she's not. This book's gonna just like. They're gonna make this elaborate, like this. The book's not actually out in the world. This is all like set up. That Emily, she's like, shh, everyone, don't tell her. Like the book's not actually out. But let's just make her happy. So I feel all those things. It's super weird, but I'm very grateful for it. I don't know if that answered your question at all. It's weird, but it's helpful.
It's very weird. With Hunger, it was actually really challenging because the editor who bought my book left, which happens in publishing. We're still friends. We're actually still very good friends. Thank God. And if I could follow her, I would. It's hard. And so I lost her, and then I lost another editor, and the third editor, is someone I didn't know, and I had to turn in this book to this complete stranger. And it was just like, she's a skinny white woman. I was like, what the fuck is she going to be able to do? I mean, actually, all my editors are skinny white women. That's just the way publishing works. But with Maya, I knew Maya. I had worked with her on Bad Feminist. We had worked together for years. And there was a rapport there. With Emily, there wasn't. It was a different Emily. There are a lot of Emilys. A lot of white Emily. And I have to say, I was really surprised in the best possible way. She gave me amazing edits for Hunger, because I always listen to edits. That's just a rule of mine. I think I've said no to 2% of the edits I've all gotten in my career, because as much as I believe in myself, it's good to have outside perspective calling you on your shit and just saying, this is weak and this is good, but it could be better, or I love this, don't change a thing. Like, all of that feedback is really useful for me. And so Emily read the book, and she was able to ask questions because there was distance for her from the material, because she's not me. And so she was able to ask the kinds of questions that I could then go and answer in revision to make the book work for a broader audience. And she was really gentle while being firm. I know that sounds weird, but she was really respectful of the material and my voice, while also just saying this doesn't work. And that really, really helped. And I was nervous about the edits. Like, what is she going to say? Is she going to hate how I've written about my life? but she respected my voice. And so I've just been really lucky in all of my books to work with great editors. And there's this myth that books don't get edited, and that's just not true. Editors work really, really hard for very, very low pay in a very expensive city. And in general, they are people who are passionate about books. And so I had someone who was very passionate about my book and respected my life story. And that really helped me have the ability to go back and step away from the things that weren't working that. Because there's one chapter that's not in the book that I'm so attached to. I still love it, and I have saved it in a Word file called I Love You. It's a chapter about baking brownies. And I felt like this was the chapter. And Emily was like, this doesn't fit in the book at all. And I was like, what are you talking about? I say some very profound and beautiful things in this chapter. And she's like, yes, but they don't belong in the book. And so those profound and beautiful things are on my hard drive. And it's good. And now that I've read the book as a whole, she's absolutely right. That chapter was just me being self-indulgent and like writing pretty things. And in no way that were connected to the overall narrative that I was constructing. And so, for me, the more personal the writing, the more I need an editor.
But that'll be in your cookbook.
Never. But I would love to just watch Ina make a cookbook. Oh my God, there's nothing I wouldn't do for that. I'd just be like, Ina, I will lick your pots clean. You can take that in a number of ways. I intended in a number of ways.
I didn't know you loved her in a sexual way.
No, I don't, but I'm open to that. And the only reason I don't is because I'm very respectful of her marriage to Jeffrey.
Yeah. I love her.
She's so and we need her now more than ever because she's also a nuclear policy expert.
I know. She's like smart as shit. That's what we call it in Florida. Smart as shit. Yeah, she's like ASMR for me. ASMR? Do you know?
What is ASMR?
Right? Am I saying that right? ASMR? Yeah, girl. Like the people get off on like soothing sounds, like people folding sheets. There's like YouTube videos of people folding sheets, and the sound is like very soothing. Or like
I didn't know there was a name for it.
So you have ASMR for Ina.
Oh, among other things, yes, I do.
Among other things, you have ASMR in your vagina for Ina.
Oh my God, that was so. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, eat only when you're hungry.
You've been listening to the Skylight Books author reading series. Don't forget, you can listen to this and all of our other great podcasts at skylightbooks.com. Thanks again for stopping by, and we hope to see you soon.